Oh, I just enabled the stream, and I want to verify that the thing is live on another computer. And if it is, we'll just start. So also, I have this backup here. Just asking people if we're live. As far as I could tell, we're streaming already.
Okay.
There you go. Yes, we're on the air. So, hello. This is Rico Brouwer from the Netherlands talking to Julia Reda. I don't know where you are. You're in Brussels, I'm assuming.
I'm in Brussels, yes.
Yeah. All right. So, Julia is member of the European Parliament, representative from Germany, has been for the last over 4 years. And we met once, I recall, in 2014. You were just a couple of months elected. We met in Istanbul. And so much has changed since then in Turkey and also yeah, all through European Union. But I recall you doing a talk there, and that would be my bridge into Article 11 and 13. But you did a talk there about freedom of panorama. And I wasn't aware of that, how that worked. You've been explaining that ever since, also through your blogs and all the other things. So, how has the last 4 years treated you? And what can you tell us about Article 11 and 13, which just happened?
Okay, I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you, but I hope I understood everything. Yeah, I think what has changed since 2014 is that when we were discussing back then about you know, a European-wide freedom of panorama, which basically just means that in all EU countries you should be allowed to take pictures in public places without having to worry about copyright law. We were talking about improving copyright law, making it easier to understand, making it make sense in the digital environment. And what we're seeing now is that once again, the pirates are at the forefront of fighting problematic changes to the copyright law that would make the law even more complicated and would further curtail freedoms online. So in that respect, I would say it's kind of a disappointing development because, you know, in 2014, even the European Commission was saying, hey,
I'm losing your audio here. You've muted yourself, maybe. I feel you've... Yeah, that's the button.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now it's better.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Sorry, where did I break up?
So you were telling me that back in 2014 you were improving copyright law, where
Right.
currently, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, currently, so we're all again taking a step back, and we are now dealing with two specific proposals that the European Parliament has just endorsed, the link tax and the upload filters, that are actually moving in the opposite direction of what we want to see. So that's pretty disappointing, but on the positive side, I would say that the last 4 years have shown that only having a single pirate in the European Parliament can already change a lot, and starting with having all the information that we need to even know what's going on in terms of digital policies. And even on the copyright directive, the outcome is still uncertain because we've managed to build a significant opposition to these plans. And the vote last week in the end was relatively close. It was the upload filters were adopted by about 60 votes. So yeah, I hope that in the next parliament there will be more pirates, also from other countries like Czech Republic, and that we'll have a chance to actually, yeah, improve things rather than just fighting against negative proposals that will invariably come out from the European Commission.
Yeah. So just the technical part of the directive that was just voted on. Maybe there's two questions that aren't clear to me just yet. So
Yeah.
one is, it's a directive, so that's something different than a law, right? How does it end up in law in Holland?
So a directive is a piece of legislation that gives member states some room to define the details. whereas a regulation is a law that is directly applicable in the Netherlands.
Right.
So that means that once this copyright directive is adopted, it will be, well, some version of it will be proposed as a change to the Dutch law. And quite often what happens in discussions about digital rights is that the protests only start when the national laws come out and not the European directives. So in that respect, I guess it's good that we're talking about this law now,
Yes.
when we can still do something about it. Because, I mean, actually the Dutch government has been pretty critical of this proposal. But unfortunately, they are part of a relatively small group of critical countries at the moment. But I think it's extremely important to keep, to keep showing the Dutch government and also the Dutch MPs that people are very critical of this proposal and that they need to stop it while it's being discussed at a European level, and not later throw up their hands and say, sorry, there's nothing we can do about it, because they can do something about it by trying to mobilize opposition against it now.
Now that is also one of, as far as I can tell from here, one of the major achievements that you, as that one pirate over there, managed to. Oh, who's connecting here? Hello, Maarten. You want to join? This is Maarten from Piratenpartij in Utrecht. You just connected. Is that intentional?
I thought I was getting into a test session. Is that correct?
No, disconnect yourself then. We're live streaming, dude. Bye-bye. Oh, the system is resilient. Last time we tried this, it crashed. Anyways.
It's a very open interview form. That's nice.
Yeah. Well, Maarten is,
right.
We're running this through Piratenpartij in Utrecht, so Maarten is the chair
okay.
from there. So anyway, you got the timing wrong. Anyway, so that's one, the directive, or is it law? And I was trying to make the point that the fact that we're talking European directives at this point, where it's been voted on in July and now again, that's a major improvement also. And that's something that that you did more than anyone else through all the stuff you're sharing. Now the other question that I have is, it was Article 11 and 13 were adopted September 12th. So are they going to be changed through European Parliament now that we have a yes vote on those, or are they fixed in stone now?
They're not fixed in stone yet, because so far we still have two different versions of this copyright directive. One version that the Parliament has just approved, and a different version that the Council has approved. And both of them include the link tags, and both of them include upload filters, but in slightly different ways. And they will now have to negotiate with each other in order to come up with a common text. And this is kind of our last chance to stop these proposals. Of course, it's relatively difficult to change the course of these negotiations if both sides have already in principle agreed, but it's not impossible. I mean, there are some precedents, like for example, when I just started working in the European Parliament, we had a negotiation, a trilogue on the Trade Secrets Directive, where both the Parliament position and the Council position were pretty much ignoring the whistleblower protection. And while we were having the trilogue negotiations, so after Parliament had already voted on its position, suddenly there started to be a lot of public attention, especially journalists from France started talking about it and started talking about the problem for whistleblowers. And the end result of the trilogue was that we managed to get a better exception for whistleblowers than either of the original positions had. And a few years later, the European Commission now actually came out with a proposal for a direction on whistleblower protection. So you never know, like, what kind of effects this can have. So the bottom line is, even though this vote was a big defeat for us, the Parliament has approved the filters and the link tags for now. It's not the final vote. The final vote will most likely be in the spring. And it's extremely important now to keep talking to the members of the European Parliament, because they will have a chance to vote again. and to also look very closely at what the governments are doing. And there, I would say the Dutch government has been one of the most critical ones. This is good, but they have to keep up this criticism, and they have to try to convince other governments to follow them.
Okay. So, yeah, well, it does feel a bit as a defeat with the vote in September, but do you have you recovered enough to have a game plan then, from your perspective already?
Yeah, I mean, of course, this vote was always going to be more difficult than the one in July, because in July you had kind of one full package and people could say either yes or no. And in this vote, it was a bit more complicated because you had to vote on individual amendments. And so, for example, there were some people who were not very happy with the upload filters as they are, but they don't want to delete Article 13 altogether. They want to find something in between. And there are other people who want to delete it, but are not willing to vote for any alternative proposal. And so in a way, I think the opposition to these proposals has split itself up a little bit. And that is, of course, a strategic difficulty. So yeah, it was not completely surprising that we ended up losing this vote. It was, of course, a disappointment because, well, we had some momentum and protests going on, but of course the entertainment industry has also not stayed quiet. I think for them, the vote in July was a bit of a wake-up call, and they really started lobbying MEPs very strongly. So I think, yeah, but we need to kind of roll with the punches. You know, we lost the first vote in the committee in June. We won the second vote in July. Now we lost the third vote in September. I just hope we're going to win the final vote. And in order to be able to do that, we have to keep fighting and not be discouraged.
So is that what happened then in July when we won, if you want to call it like that, that the industry really doubled down on lobbying to members of parliament? Yeah, you saw that also.
For sure,
yeah.
Yes. I mean, we have seen a huge increase in the lobbying to every single member of the European Parliament. And we've also seen an increase in kind of opinion pieces in the media that were not trying to report the different sides of the debate, but rather speaking on their own behalf as media organizations. So especially on the link tax, I found that quite discouraging that so many newspapers started promoting the link tax in the hope that it will somehow give them back some of the lost advertisement revenues that they have lost to Google and Facebook, but completely ignoring the extremely negative experience that we have already had with the link tax in Germany and the fact that it just doesn't work. Because, I mean, it's true that you know, newspapers have lost a lot of advertising revenues to Google and Facebook, but that has nothing to do with copyright. That's because of the use of targeted advertisement and the use of personal data by these huge companies. So I'm feeling, yeah, this has definitely had a huge impact on the vote.
I talked to the chairman of the organization that runs the infrastructure for the Dutch internet, Michiel Steltman. And he's opposed to Article 11 and 13. He is in favor of a free and open internet, just like yourself. My question to him was, so, okay, how are you lobbying then to the European parliamentarians or the Dutch government or all through European Union? And are you not doing a better job than the commercial copyright industry? And
right.
That he actually confirmed that, or that was his point, saying, yeah, we need to, as an open source community, as the people in favor of a free and open internet, we need to lobby. We need to learn how to lobby just as hard as the commercial entities already do.
Yeah.
So my question to you is then, how do we get to you and your colleagues in a meaningful way to help you in your cause?
I think the most important thing is before you try to contact a member of parliament, try to spend 5 minutes to find out who they are and what they stand for. So, for example, if you look at the Dutch members, all except the CDA actually voted against. So that means if you're contacting anybody except for the CDA, what you're going to do is to thank them for their support for a free internet and to tell them to keep it up and tell them, look, I have some extra arguments that might be useful. So for example, in the case of somebody running the IT infrastructure, offer them, you know, expert advice on, and arguments that they can use when talking to their peers. Of course, if you're talking to a member from the CDA, try to find out why they voted in favor. And because it may be that they just followed their party line. I mean, they are part of the largest group in the European Parliament, the EPP group, and the person in charge of the copyright directive, the German Axel Voss, is also part of the EPP. And of course, he put a lot of pressure on everybody in his group to just follow his line. So don't assume that they will necessarily, you know, just because they voted in favor doesn't mean that they're your enemies. Try to find out why they voted in favor and try to explain why this proposal, the way it is right now, is not a solution. But that's really important. Like before you start talking to somebody, to know where they stand, to know how they voted in the past, and to tailor your message to that and show them that you're not just sending a mass email to 750 people.
Yeah, the rants end up in the garbage bin, and the people that have educated themselves into you and where you stand, those are the ones that you listen to. That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So I read your blogs, and actually some Dutch pirates translated them and put them on the Dutch website for our audiences.
I really have to thank them. I mean, I think Dutch is one of the best the covered languages I have on my website, just because the Dutch Pirate Party and the volunteers are so active in making sure that everything's available in Dutch. And I think that's great, and I can only encourage more people to do it because, you know, I mean, most people in the Netherlands speak English, but it's just easier to be able to also read something in your own language.
Yeah, and the main reason, as far as the way I look at it, is that you want to get the message across to the people outside of your own pirate bubble. You know, the people that may not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you made the point that maybe in being somewhat disappointed in your colleagues there, asking, did you actually read the proposal, or did you really dig into that? So your assessment, the members of parliament, are they savvy? Are they knowledgeable on the Article 11 and 13 by now?
Well, I think it's first of all, they are put in a very difficult position. Because normally, as a member of parliament, you don't have to be an expert on everything. Usually you have your area of expertise, and for everything else, you follow your colleagues from your group that have the same ideology and the same views, and you can trust them. On copyright, this system breaks down completely because you can be, you know, member of pretty much any political group and hold any political view on copyright because, you know, you can be critical of extensions of copyright because you are a free market liberal and you believe that copyright is a monopoly, or you can be of the same opinion because you think all property is theft, you know, like there is no clear ideological divide on copyright. As a general rule, the conservative half of the parliament has been more in favor of upload filters and the link tags than the left, but this is a very general rule. And if you look at the breakdown of positions, there is no party group or no political group that has been completely united. So yeah, it's difficult. I mean, we vote on thousands of amendments every plenary week. And no, we cannot read all of them and understand them in detail. But of course, I am frustrated if somebody like Axel Voss, who is in charge of the directive, and like this is his main responsibility, if he doesn't even know what he voted for. Yeah. Like for this new sports right, like this new exclusive right for sports organizers, where he told a journalist after the vote that he was surprised that that was included. Well, he voted for it, and he voted for it several times, first in the committee and now again in plenary. So I think those who are making voting recommendations to their colleagues, they really have a responsibility to know exactly what they're doing.
All right. All right. Yeah, the personal question for me is being quite. I've looked at the Dutch Parliament more than European Parliament. Sorry, but so one of the frustrating things here is called fraction discipline, right? You vote the way your party votes. Does it also work with CDA following Axel? Is there pressure there between countries?
Yes, I mean, the European Parliament generally has pretty low party or fraction discipline, and I think that's generally a good thing. So in the vote in July, actually, the European People's Party, the largest group, was very, well, relatively split. Like there was a sizable minority that actually voted against the proposal. But it seems that since then they have cracked down quite hard on this, so that in the vote in September, except for the Swedish members, all the EPP members voted in favor, even the ones that were against in the past. So I do think that there is some degree of group discipline, and there has also been a media report at some point where an anonymous source from the EPP group was saying that they are being put under pressure. If they don't vote for the link tax, they will not get any responsible positions in the group anymore. But it seems to be that this pressure is by far strongest in the EPP group and not so strong in the groups on the left, which is of course strategically really a problem. Like if one group, like if one part of the parliament is really united behind a position and is not allowing different opinions, and the other side is allowing everybody to vote how they want, it's usually, well, the conservatives that will end up winning.
Yeah, I get your point. You mentioned Sweden; they just had their vote.
Right.
You were aware of that. I just contacted Magnus Andersson, who was the front runner, asking him a bit of a mean question. Sorry, Magnus, but so it's been a week or a little over a week, and I asked him, "So, are you up for the next elections, European Parliament 2019?" Because I remember vividly how it was in 2017 in Holland. I mean, you're disappointed and you're tired, but there's a good chance. That's what he said. So I'm paraphrasing that they're gonna run, and they're in good spirit. So what's your assessment of pirate parties all through European Union for the 2019 elections?
Right, so I think with Sweden, what is really good is that they have had a long-term impact on the political environment in Sweden. Like, I think it's no coincidence that the Swedish conservatives were the only conservative group in the EPP that actually voted against these proposals. And I think it's because, you know, the Pirate Party has had an influence on the political climate in Sweden, and it's not as easy as it used to be to back completely crazy expansions of copyright law. And I think that is to a large extent thanks to the Pirate Party. But of course, this change has also made it harder for them to actually win in elections, because, you know, if you feel that other parties are taking care of the issue, it's more difficult. I would think that the best chances for the European elections will probably be had for the Czech Pirate Party. They entered the national parliament a little over a year ago, I think, with 10% of the vote, and they're now polling at 15%. So that's really amazing. And unfortunately, the Czech political system has really shifted so far to the right that by now the Pirate Party is really like the main progressive force in the Czech parliament. Like the former kind of left-wing parties have more or less disappeared. Partly also because they probably had connections to former Soviet parties and so on. And the Pirate Party, as kind of a progressive force that is not connected to that history in any way, and that is standing for transparency and anti-corruption, can have a really good chance in a country like Czech Republic. So I expect that they will send several people to the European Parliament, and I hope that their success will also have a positive impact maybe on neighboring countries like Slovenia or Slovakia.
Yeah, even for this election already, or for next time round?
For this European election, yes. So I think Czech Republic will for sure get in unless something really crazy happens in the meantime. and possibly Germany will make it again if the electoral law doesn't get changed, and Slovenia might also have a good chance. Like, I think that for the Netherlands, of course, it's easier than some countries because there is no threshold except for the natural threshold. But of course, it's still kind of a difficult situation with a pirate party that hasn't had such electoral successes like in Czech.
Yeah,
But I'm confident we'll have more pirates overall than we have right now, so that's good.
Was that hard for you doing it? Well, you have your staff obviously, but still, it's just you, right?
Yeah. I think it has advantages and disadvantages because, as you know, also where we did have pirate party groups in Germany, they would have a tendency to fight. And so I have been the only German pirate group in a parliament that has always been 100% united. So that's nice. But of course, I mean, if you're a single member of parliament, you do not have the same weight as a political delegation of several people in negotiations with political groups. Like, for example, I would have really liked to see the name pirate also show up in the name of our political group. I'm a member of the Greens EFA group in the European Parliament, where from the Netherlands you have GroenLinks, and we work together fine with them. Like, really, we've had no trouble.
Yeah.
But of course, sometimes if I'm talking to journalists, especially ones that are not from Germany, I have to explain to them that I'm actually not a Green member, I'm a pirate.
Yeah.
And so if you have several, of course, it would be much easier to make sure that this also shows up in the branding of the group and so on, and to just be more visible as pirates and not just as part of this green group.
Okay. So how did four and a half year of this? Oh, when I met you in 2014, my first question to you was, or second, whatever, was what are you looking forward to, and also what do you look up to? And the first answer that you gave is, well, the traveling between Brussels and Strasbourg for the vote. That was major downside of the job. So looking back over the last 4.5 years, has that changed or something?
No, I still hate the traveling between Brussels and Strasbourg, and I think it's just one of those things that, you know, if we want people to believe in the EU and to believe in, you know, being able to compromise and overcome differences, it's just really embarrassing that we cannot get rid of this very idiotic issue. So I think it would just be a huge sign of, you know, the functioning of the European system and the power of compromise to be able to come up with a single seat for the European Parliament. I mean, personally, of course, I don't like having to go back and forth every month, but I think it's also just a waste of taxpayer money, and it's a drain on the environment that so many people just, you know, pack their bags, go to a different country to do exactly the same job that we're doing in Brussels. It just doesn't make any sense.
No, true. So you mentioned Czech Republic being the strongest pirate entity currently in your observation in the European Union. Anything that we from the other countries can do to help them?
I think we can probably learn a lot from them. Like, of course, I think if you want to help them, the best is to ask them, like, what do you need? Because what I can give them is mostly information about, like, how the Czech members voted, and I try to keep them in the loop about how the copyright reform develops and so on. But I don't know to what extent they need volunteer support around. Like, I know that when the German pirates were doing really well, we were always super happy to have international visitors and supporters. But I think, yeah, I'm not sure how much help they need from us, because they're just, you know, so much bigger and so much more successful than the other parties, that may be actually helping some of the small parties in neighboring countries that are just starting out, like the Pirate Party of Slovakia, who have basically just been founded, might be the better strategy, because they probably need more support at this point in their development.
Oh yeah. So okay. So has campaigning started already, or am I the first to bring it up?
It's starting, you know, I mean, the German Pirate Party has elected its list. I already said like relatively long time ago that I only want to do one term because I don't want to be, you know, professional politician and make that like my long-term job. But our candidate is Patrick Breyer, who is really well known as a privacy and transparency activist. He has won several cases in front of the European Court of Justice, and he's also been a member of state parliament in Germany for a few years for the Pirates.
Okay.
So yeah, their campaigning is starting, and we're trying to make sure that also people outside of Germany get to know Patrick. And you can also feel it in the European Parliament that certainly, you know, things are heating up. There's not a lot of time left to finish legislation. And that may also be the reason why, you know, why the Parliament adopted such a terrible proposal on copyright, because they are willing to adopt just about anything as long as it's finished before the elections, because after that it may, you know, take a long time before it's picked up again. But I think there's also a chance in that, because that means that the final vote on copyright will likely be in March or something, so very close to the elections. And then we can ask candidates, you know, like, how will you vote on this, and how do you explain to your potential voters that you want to limit internet freedoms?
Yeah, so pirates all through European Union can actually build their campaign around just this one vote that's taking place only a month or 2 months before elections.
Absolutely. Like, you can ask every single candidate from the other parties,
Yeah.
how have they voted on it if they're already in parliament, or how will they vote if they get elected, and, you know, really make people pledge to support online freedoms. And, you know, if other people are not willing to do that, then obviously, if you know, better vote for the original then.
Okay. Well, so for me, as a final question to you, is getting back to link tags and upload filter and the threat to an open, free internet.
Yeah.
Does that come from ignorance by members of parliament and the people in the European Union, or is the threat more the big corporations that just know how to play our representatives? What's the biggest threat?
I think it's more the latter. I mean, of course, not every single member is perfectly informed about every detail of the technology and of copyright law, but at the end of the day, I think it is more a question of corporate power versus the power of academic evidence. I mean, members of parliament are just bombarded with so many lobbying messages, and a lot of them being very misleading and just, you know, giving them misinformation about what the text actually says. Just to give you an example, the European press publishers, they have different trade associations, and they have been spreading the myth that the link text does not apply to Wikipedia. And what they are using in order to substantiate that is actually part of the text on the upload filter article. So it's true that Wikipedia is excluded from the upload filter article, but that has nothing to do with the link text. And it's very difficult for a member of parliament who hasn't worked on the text themselves to be able to see through this kind of misinformation.
Are you regarded as a source of authority on the matter by the colleagues there?
It depends. I mean, there are certainly a lot of journalists who, you know, talk very positively about my website and about the way that I explaining these different proposals. And, you know, whether you agree with me or not, they have to admit that the way that I present it is the most informative. In the European Parliament, it really depends. I think there are a lot of people who listen very closely to what I say and to how I interpret different proposals on copyright. But there's also the other extreme, people who will disregard any statement just because it comes from me. So, for example, when we were voting in the committee on copyright, the rapporteur Axel Voss actually put a negative recommendation on every single one of my amendments just because they were written by me. And sometimes I was able to point out, look, actually, this says exactly the same thing as you have agreed someplace else. And then in one case, he actually changed a negative recommendation to a positive one. But like without even reading what I say, he would recommend to vote against it. And so that also exists, that people think that just because I'm from the Pirate Party, whatever I say on copyright must be wrong without even looking at what it actually is that I'm saying.
Maybe not even that. Maybe it's more the way I'm interpreting this is that he's more sorry, Axel, more part of the lobby industry than being than a representative of the European Union. My word. So.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a common thing. You also see that in a lot of national parliaments, that the government votes against everything from the opposition as a matter of principle. So it could also just be that, but I think it's not very conducive to finding good solutions.
Any last things that you want to put in here, Julia?
Just, you know, for people to be clear that this fight is not over, and it all depends on the final vote now, and things can, you know, heat up pretty quickly, especially in the months leading up to an election. And yeah, last but not least, absolutely vote in the European elections, because this is where the decisions about the open internet are being made.
Thank you so much for this talk.
Thank you.
And best of luck for the last couple of months.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.